The religious have a lot of problems, and one of the biggest is their abject refusal to actually talk to atheists. Instead, they just proclaim what they think is true, even though it isn't, because this isn't really about convincing us. It's about holding their hands out for the money of the terminally gullible and then saying, "See, we were right all along." That is entirely irrational, but that's what's actually going on. So let's do some more of that, okay? We're back with the Muslim apologist who seems convinced that atheists will believe in God, his God, in 6 minutes, but I have my doubts, especially after watching the first part. I don't get how these people can be so dumb. But they all are, right? Maybe he'll get better, I don't know, but I think it's a lot more likely that he's going to get worse, so let's go see. Will we be convinced to believe in any God by the end of this video? I don't think so, but hey, I could be wrong.
The third question from the creator, chapter number 52, verse number 36. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أم خلقوا السماوات والأرض بل لا يوقنون. Or did they create the heavens and the earth? Atheists, did you create the universe?
This is where the religious really start to get entirely incoherent. I mean, obviously, I didn't do it since it existed more than 14 billion years before I did. It gets really ridiculous when you just look at their questions, because their questions in and of themselves are just stupid. This is why we're not impressed with your silly religious books, because the people who wrote them were just as dumb as you are, probably dumber. So we're right back to...
What you talking about, Willis?
These questions don't make any sense, but since these people have been indoctrinated into finding value in their silly books, even if there isn't any demonstrably there, they can't see just how ridiculous it all is. So no, I didn't create the universe, and neither did any atheist, because the universe predates us all by billions and billions of years. Don't be stupid. It's not a good look.
If the answer is no, it proves that Creator has created it, not you.
That's stupid. I mean, seriously stupid. Really, really, really stupid. That's like saying if you didn't create your parents, then your parents didn't create you. What the fuck are you even talking about? It proves nothing about any creator. So far as we can tell, based on all the evidence that we actually have, nothing created the universe. It came about through purely naturalistic means. There was no creator, yet the religious, they just can't accept that, can they? Because they're deluded out of their ever-loving gourds. They are only capable of looking at reality through their thick religious goggles, and when it turns out that the goggles are just painted black so they can't see anything, they just make it all up because, hey, sounds good to them, right? And then they wonder what's wrong with us. Maybe you ought to look in the mirror if you can, because that's the real answer to your question.
Recap. 3 questions are: were you created from nothing?
No, because nothing doesn't exist. Nothing can't exist. I can play the recap game just as easily as you can. Stop being an idiot.
Did you create yourselves?
Nope, because that is literally impossible. That doesn't mean any god was responsible, though. I exist because my parents fucked. I'm sorry you can't deal with the biological reality, but that is what actually happened. You need to grow the fuck up, because you're just making yourself look like a complete moron.
Did you create the universe?
Oh look, another nonsensical question. Obviously, we didn't create the universe, since the universe existed billions of years before we did and gave rise to everything within it. But that doesn't mean that any god's done it. This is the most obvious argument from absurd ignorance ever. And of course, it comes from the religious.
So if your answer is that you were not created by nothing, you didn't create yourselves, and you did not create the universe, it proves beyond any shadow of doubt that the Creator has created you.
Wrong. This is ridiculously fallacious. That's why religion is one massive argument from ignorance. Well, I don't get it, therefore God. And I'm sorry for any Muslims who happen to be watching, but honestly, your preachers, and I have no idea what title this guy goes by, so I'm just going to stick with preacher, but your preachers are even dumber than most Christian ones, and that's kind of saying something. This is a gigantic false dichotomy. Well, if some ridiculous bullshit that I just made up in my head isn't true, then my God done it. How dumb can you be? I'm serious. How dumb can this guy actually be? Because I don't think you could be any dumber if you tried. And I get people asking why I don't do an awful lot of Muslim videos, and this is one of the reasons. Yes, Christian videos are more plentiful on YouTube. There is the clear language barrier, which we've already addressed. Most Muslim videos aren't targeting an English-speaking audience, but this is another reason, because holy crap, this is just stupid. I mean, this stuff makes Daniel King look like a genius. Every once in a while, you just have to look in and say, yep, they're still that dumb. But I see no reason to do it regularly. Islamic arguments are either identical to the ones that the Christians are using, just swapping the name of the god, and sometimes not even that, or they're just drivel. So, sorry Muslims, you need a serious IQ infusion, because this is just pathetic.
Moving on to Kalam's cosmological argument.
See? What'd I tell you? I had no idea that was coming up, but this is one of the stupidest apologetic arguments ever devised. Now, we'll get to that in a second. I just want to at least give him a chance to set himself up for a tumble, but all of this is just laughably ridiculous. The argument doesn't even mention any gods. If the conclusion does not arise from the premises, in this case, that a god done it, then it's not an argument for any god. I mean, seriously, how dumb can you be?
The third one, the three statements, the three arguments, the third one is the deductive one.
But it doesn't mention any gods. You don't just get to shove "my God done it" in there without looking like a moron. This argument gets you nowhere. It says that there was a cause. It does not say what that cause was. And in fact, the whole thing is kind of ridiculous because the premises are just awful. But it gets you absolutely nowhere close to a creator or a god or whatever you want to call it, and you should stop making a fool of yourself trying to pretend that it does.
It is deduced from the first two premises. If the first two premises are correct, the third one must be true.
But there's no reason whatsoever to think that the first two premises are true, which is kind of the problem. I have no idea if he's going to get into it any further. We'll wait and see, I guess. He's still got another 2 minutes of video to go, so hey, who knows? But I'm going to touch on it here anyway, just in case. If he does, I'll just apologize and expand on it, but if not, then I want to make sure I get this in. I don't watch these things ahead of time, so I've got no idea where he's actually going, so I'll just throw it in here where I think they might fit. So here goes nothing. The first premise is doubtful, since causality only demonstrably applies to things inside our universe, not to the universe itself. That's the fallacy of composition. We have no reason to think that the physical laws of the universe existed prior to the Big Bang, which likely caused them, although we don't know for sure because we don't know a lot of things for sure, and the religious need to stop pretending they do. All we can do is say we don't know. Therefore, as causality isn't a guarantee, the first premise is rejected. The second premise, that the universe itself had a beginning, that's simply false. Our particular instantiation of space-time did, after a fashion, but it came from other pre-existing stuff. The Big Bang came from a state of intense heat and density. Intense heat and density is not nothing. Therefore, the Big Bang is just a change in state, not something that began, in the same sense that you didn't begin to exist when you were born. You were just a rearrangement of pre-existing matter. So that's just bullshit. Everything, the conclusion, the premises, everything is just bullshit. And of course, that makes the conclusion, which again doesn't address any gods at all, doubtful at best and entirely false at worst. So, not remotely impressed.
The first two premises. Number one, everything that begins to exist has a cause.
Okay, I guess we're doing this. I don't mind, it's okay. But let's be honest here, you can't actually prove that. Even if every single instance you can come up with where something begins to exist, and let's be honest, nothing begins to exist, it all just changes form, but let's pretend and say that happens just for shits and giggles. But even if every instance we have shows that to be true, that doesn't prove that every instance everywhere must be true. Just because every case that we ever see, that's the case, that doesn't make it universally valid. That's only our experience, and our experience is by definition limited. Our experience tells us that things can't just appear out of nowhere, but under quantum mechanics, quarks do it all the time. Our experience tells us that time doesn't stop. But when you get within the event horizon of a black hole, it sure seems to, or at least to the outside observer, it certainly seems to. So there is that. So it seems to me doesn't actually mean anything. This is an unjustified premise, and thus it must be rejected. Next!
Anybody disagrees? No?
I love how he just assumes that nobody's going to disagree, but yeah, I do, at least potentially. This is how you know they're not talking to us. They're only talking to other Muslims who are just going to go, well, okay, you said it, so it must be true, which is, of course, complete bullshit. Of course, I've brought this up to theists, and they don't know what the hell to say. They just make excuses and then head for the hills. They can't imagine that their claims aren't universally accepted because without these claims, their arguments collapse into a pile of dogmatism. They have absolutely nothing else, which is why it's funny to poke holes in their empty assertions and just watch them completely fumble the ball. Kalam is a complete waste of time, just like everything else they do.
Second, the universe began to exist.
It depends on how you define your terms. This is why you have to be very careful about what you let them put out there. What do you mean by begin? And no, I'm not doing a Jordan Peterson what is bullshit thing, because that's bullshit, but you do have to make sure they define their terms in a way that everyone can respect. Because the evidence that we have doesn't necessarily support that there is a beginning. Most modern cosmological models do not assert that. Some do, but most that I've seen, they do not. And there goes Kalam again. If the premises are not true and not accepted by all parties, then the entire argument collapses. And that's, of course, why they're not talking to us, because we're not going to accept their premises, so they're only going to talk to people who will. And that's kind of dishonest, don't you think? I'm sure he's expecting everyone to let it pass without question, but I'm not going to do that. I am not convinced that the universe ever began to exist in the sense that it started from no pre-existing material whatsoever. So what are you going to do now? Run and hide?
Therefore, the universe has a cause.
Even if we accepted the premises, which we don't, that doesn't get him where he wants to go. It doesn't make that cause any God. Because I can say lightning begins to exist and all that, but that doesn't make the cause of lightning, which we do understand, any imaginary father figure in the sky. That went away with Thor because we realized that Thor was stupid. It makes it an entirely natural process that can be tested for, replicated, and understood. No gods required. Therefore, the Kalam is entirely pointless in any attempt to justify any gods existing. Now you need an entirely new argument to get from a cause to God done it. And you notice how they're not even trying to do that, right?
You can name that cause anything: Creator, Allah, God.
No, you can't. Not if you want to be honest, anyhow. I mean, I could name it Mickey Mouse, maybe, but that doesn't mean that Mickey Mouse done it. This is just a mad dash toward, I really, really, really want it to be true, but that's not how that works. Even if you did establish a cause, and you haven't gotten anywhere close to that, but even if you did, that doesn't make that cause a God, much less your God. You still have all that work to do, and you're not even trying. This is where the religious fail, and it doesn't matter what religion you're talking about, because they're all this bad. They assume, based on blind faith and fee-fees, that everything they believe is automatically true. So there. And therefore, since everyone has to be just like they are, I mean, just ask them, and convinced by the same terrible arguments that they are, and be looking for the same imaginary father figure in the sky that they are, that if they can make that irrational leap to their gods, well, hey, so can everybody else. But they're just wrong.
But beyond shadow of doubt, it is proved that Creator exists, God exists.
You have done absolutely nothing of the sort. This is a problem that we see all the time with all kinds of theists, right? Absolutely absurd confidence in things they have not remotely done because they really, really wish it was true. And then they say, well, atheists will definitely believe this, said without consulting any actual atheists, and then we just sit there and roll our eyes at the religious stupidity, and they can't understand why. How about you let us decide what's going to convince us? Maybe give that one a shot. Not that they actually care, because this isn't about convincing atheists at all. It's about comforting those who already believe, because that's where all the money is. This isn't about convincing atheists, it's about picking the pockets of the religiously gullible. No actual atheist is going to watch this video and believe in any God. We're just going to laugh at the stupidity on display. Seriously, all he's doing is proving what a complete idiot he is. Big surprise there.
Atheist is going to turn around and ask you a question. The atheist will ask, okay, you said anything that begins to exist must have a cause. What's the cause for the Creator?
Now, I'll let him get to that in a second, but he's just going to assert, Allah had no beginning, which is the whole reason they made up the Kalam in the first place. The original cosmological argument didn't include the whole began to exist bit, so people just asked what caused God, and the religious, not liking that, they just tacked on, well, it has to begin to exist to get out of logic and reason free, and now they can pretend that it means something of value, which it absolutely doesn't. Because they haven't shown that their imaginary friend had no beginning. They haven't even shown that their imaginary friend exists in the first place. This is just special pleading. If you can say that God has always existed just because it makes you feel good, well, hey, I can say the universe has always existed and we're at a stalemate. Except I can show that the universe exists and you can't do the same thing with your God. But let's let him do his thing so we can point out all the irrationality inherent in it. Won't that be fun?
Who created God? Atheists ask this question, that who created God? Congratulations, from now onwards, you're not an atheist anymore. Why? Here's the proof.
This is going to be stupid, I'm sure, but at least he didn't immediately leap to the bald assertion that I figured that he would. But that's probably coming up if I know anything about the religious. Then again, he's still just wrong, so it doesn't really matter. I don't believe in any gods, thus I'm still an atheist. I can ask questions like that, believe it or not, and you don't have to like it. I can ask questions about Harry Potter without believing Harry Potter is real. Now, I've got no idea what his supposed proof is going to be. We'll just have to see. But the religious spend an awful lot of time just leaping to unjustified conclusions because they just really want them to be true. But that's not rational, is it? So let's see his proof, in pretty big air quotes, because I figure we need a good laugh.
If you ask, who does this laptop belong to? It means you've agreed this is a laptop.
Of course I agree it's a laptop. I mean, I can see it right there. I have all the evidence that I need to justify that position. And because we generally understand that manufactured products are property, well, I can ask whose property they are because I understand how our system of society actually works. I do not accept that with any gods. I, as a thinking agent, belong to no one but myself. We don't do slavery like what happens in some places in the Islamic world. So I'm going to reject your premise out of hand before you even make it, assuming I'm reading this correctly, which I figure I am. So let's get back to it and see if I'm right.
Now all you want to know is just more information, that who does it belong to. Now you asked a question, who created God? It means that's a proof that now you believe in the existence of God.
That's bullshit, though. I already addressed that. I can ask questions about Harry Potter without believing Harry Potter exists, because Harry Potter as a concept was created by a person, and I can ask questions of that person about the concept they created without thinking that Harry Potter is a real guy. I believe that some people have a concept of a god, but that doesn't make a god real. Some people believe in leprechauns for the same reasons, and it's the same deal. I can acknowledge that you are irrational and have a ridiculous belief in an imaginary man in the sky, but that doesn't mean that I share it. I'm just acknowledging that you do. This is where the whole thing starts to fall apart. This is bullshit that he's spewing because he knows it appeals to his religious audience, not because he knows anything at all about atheists. Christians will pull the same thing, saying, well, my book says a thing, therefore it's true. Funny, you didn't seem to run it past all the people who are laughing at your stupidity, did ya? Because if you do that, you would see just how dumb your book and your beliefs actually are, because you're afraid to talk to the people who don't agree with you. And that's kind of a problem. No, you're too busy pandering to your meal ticket and using unjustified claims about atheism as a dodge to get around the uncomfortable reality that people honestly don't take your silly mythological, magical beliefs seriously. So I can certainly ask what caused your imaginary friend in your mythology. Not in reality, since there's no reason to think that your imaginary asshole is actually real. But in your head, how do you explain it reasonably and rationally, and most importantly, consistently? And they can't do that, can they? They just really want to believe.
You just want to have more information about God, that who created God. Now, what are the consequences of not believing in a creator?
None whatsoever, unless you've got demonstrable evidence that a creator exists. And in this case, your creator, the one you believe exists. Got any? I didn't think so. That's the problem, because we're not going to take you seriously unless you can provide verifiable evidence that any of the things that you are claiming actually are real, and you can't do that. This is why you keep playing these ridiculous word games, because it's the only way you can convince your paying audience that you're not completely full of shit, even though you are. Even those people over there, they say they don't believe, but they really believe because I say so. Well, you don't get to speak for other people, do you? You have to go and ask them. And I think they're going to have a far different answer than the one you're purporting they will. But this is why they spend all of their time in their own little insular religious bubble, talking only to each other. They don't have to go out and get laughed at by those mean atheists who think your beliefs are stupid and ridiculous. No, it's easier to just lie to yourself and everyone around you and not worry about actually corroborating anything. Because these people just don't care.
Chapter number 52, verse number 11. Woe on that day to non-believers.
So, my book says a thing. Well, fuck your book. I don't care about your book. No atheist cares about your book at all. You might think it's hot shit, but we don't. We just think it's shit. So he's gone through an entire video now and done absolutely nothing but make a complete fool of himself. Well, I think he's still got a little bit, but we'll get there in a second. This is exactly why the religious never get anywhere. They spend so much time trying to convince each other that they forget to try to convince us. Instead, they just pretend that we're just like they are, and that we're as gullible and stupid and desperate as they are, and we're just not. We are about as far from you as you can get. That's why we're out here in the real world dealing with reality, and they're not. And that's kind of sad, isn't it?
Number 13. The day when they're shoved into the fire of hell.
We don't believe that, and you are presenting no evidence whatsoever to back any of it up. Clearly, he isn't making these videos for atheists. We're going to continue not being convinced by his bullshit, despite his best efforts to pretend otherwise, because that's all it is. It's pretend. It's playing make-believe. It's an irrational, childish fantasy in his head. And I'm sorry, but you're just too old to still be acting like a child. But these people couldn't care less, could they?
Number 14. This is the fire which you used to deny.
What is this, the rapid fire round? Reading to us out of your stupid book doesn't mean anything. I thought this was supposed to be about proving God to atheists. We will believe, spelled wrong. But nothing is said will convince anyone of anything other than that he's a complete moron spouting religious tripe to people who aren't capable of rational thought or critical evaluation. Meanwhile, atheists are just laughing our asses off at his stupidity, and this goes for all apologists and all religions that try this. We do not believe in your imaginary friend. We think the entire idea is stupid. If you want to change our minds, you need to do more than whine and complain and pretend. You need to stop reading to us out of your stupid book, because that is never going to work. You need to come up to our level, because we're sure the hell not going to go down to yours. We are better than that, and you should be too, even though you're demonstrably not.
Number 16. Burn in it. Whether you're patient or impatient is the same for you. You're only being repaid for what you used to do.
Yeah, I think we're going to skip the next video given just how terrible he was in this one. Not that I'm at all surprised, because this is the best that the religious can do. And that's kind of pathetic, right? Yet, can't we say the exact same thing for pretty much every other apologist out there? It's preaching to the choir because that's where the money is, and we're being used as props because they need a bad guy to rail against, and since they can't actually answer our objections, they just invent things out of whole cloth and pretend that's what we're really like. Except we're not. We are not convinced by the things that you pretend will convince us. We are not saying the words that you try to shove into our mouths. We are quite capable of talking for ourselves, thank you, but you can't understand that because you just really want us to believe. If you were ever brave enough to come out of your safe spaces and actually engage with us directly and honestly, you might figure out how wrong you are, but they can't do that, can they? They just might find out that we're right. This is why none of this impresses me one bit. It's why I spend so much time pointing out the religious stupidity, and there's a lot of stupidity to point out. Now, what did you think of any of this? Let me know down in the comments. Did this guy impress you at all? I mean, at all? Do you now believe in a God, or has your estimation of human intelligence dropped by another couple points? I know which one I would pick, but how about you? Because this should not be impressive to anyone. It just shouldn't.